Sorry about the mix-up there.
No worries.
Hey, Paul, is there a problem with the Ottawa's 1968?
Yeah, just the...
You're going to use mine instead.
Dean, can you just ping me?
Yeah.
And I'll send you the meeting request if you can do that.
Okay, no problem.
Is Natalie tied up, Dean?
Looks like she's in a meeting. Let me see. Looks like she's on an AOS.
Okay, it's okay. I'm recording this session anyways for prosperity, so...
Beethoven.
Okay, Sophia, did you join?
Is she she said she signed up on the event page, and so she didn't have a dial-in number provided. So I've just given her the conference ID number.
Okay, perfect. I heard another beep.
Hi, this is Anita.
Hi, Anita.
Hi.
Sorry,
Hi, Anita. How you doing? Haven't talked since you disappeared off to have another child a couple of years ago. I think it was now.
Yeah. I'm good, Hugh. How are you?
Very good.
So,
are you working from home these days, or?
Yeah, mainly from home.
Oh.
Yeah. I'm out in Milton, so.
Right.
It's a bit of a trek out there.
You know what? We're almost neighbors, Anita. I'm in the western end of Mississauga, so.
Oh, you're in Mississauga, okay.
So, and the only way I go to Markham is I take the 407. There's no way I'm taking the 401, spending 2 hours driving.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, an hour and a half on
no,
the 401.
No way, I won't do that. I gotta go there. I'm going to Markham tomorrow.
Oh, thanks for warning us. We'll stay at home.
Okay. So, I'll give you a couple more minutes, Hugh. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
So, I see in the room, I see Radu, David, I see Sophia, Anita, Tossin, and I see Dean. Is anybody having issue? Is anybody else having issues with the dial-in numbers or anything like that?
I'm going out on a limb that if they are, they're not able to answer that question.
That's a good one. But I thought maybe they might use the message board within the meeting room, you know?
Yeah.
I feel like I'm doing a Dan Aykroyd scene or a Chevy Chase scene with making that comment. If you're not in the room, please raise your hand. So I am recording this session, guys, so that basically I'll make it available to support. So Hugh's gonna have the floor to walk through it, the core rep, FinRep stuff. If we need to look at some additional information after these sessions, then we can take that off and look at in the new year when I look at training again with you guys. But the goal is to kind of give you a walkthrough of core rep, FinRep, and next week to do the aggregate filings, just to kind of give you a little bit more knowledge as you're dealing with calls related to that area. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. The floor is yours, Hugh.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Paul. Hi everyone. So this has been falsely advertised as a Correct FinRep session. Sorry, Paul. Yeah, I'll talk about Correct FinRep, but I'll also talk about Solvency II. And the reason why I'm going to be doing that is because the way in which both of these mandates have been provisioned through CDM is essentially the same. These mandates, Correct FinRep, which is also sometimes referred to as CRD4, which is Capital Requirements Directive 4, is a European mandate for the banking industry, and Solvency II is a European mandate for the insurance industry. Both of these mandates for reporting have been the requirements for them have been identified by means of a whole set of templates that the regulator has created. Those templates need to be filled in with data, and from that, the XBRL needs to be generated and exported out of CDM and sent to the regulator. The fact that these templates are fixed in terms of shape and size, etc., means that we don't look at doing this in the same way as, say, the US GAAP reporting, where you are sort of tagging reports and using a pivot grid and that sort of stuff. In fact, we hide all the XBRL from the user, almost completely hidden from the user. So the way that works is that the tool comes along with what are called filing packages, and we've created filing packages for Correp FinRep. We've created filing packages for Solvency II, and we deliver these to the customer and regularly update them as either the requirements change or we find issues with them. This is almost completely non-synchronized with software updates. Sometimes there is a correlation between a filing package update and an interim fix, or even a new version of the product that comes out. But most of the time, that's not the case. So most of the time, they're not directly in sync. So let's go into the administration part of CDM, and let's look at this section here, configure filing options, and let's look at packages. By the way, just so you know, I'm using a demo virtual machine that's been put together by Colin Vamplew in England, and I'm also using CDM 10.2.5 that was released yesterday. So let's just hope it doesn't all fall apart, because I haven't thoroughly tested 10.2.5 myself yet. You can see listed under the filing packages here. By the way, please, anybody jump in with any questions if I'm not being clear, or you feel you want to ask some questions. You see here, I've got actually 3 filing packages installed already in CDM. Let me show you how that really works. It's very simple. We go add package, and the packages themselves are delivered in the form of a file, which has a .cdm extension. For whatever reason, they chose to use the .cdm extension, which, of course, as you probably are aware, is the same extension that is used for a saved report. So the two are not to be confused. However, they are completely different format files, and I don't know why my machine's not going so slowly, but you're just going to put up with that. In a moment, we should browse to the folder. Yeah, here we go, where we have all of these filing packages available. And as you can see, I've got a bunch of historical ones that have been delivered over the course of time, over the last number of months. We've named them EBA. EBA stands for European Banking Authority, and that is the central authority in Europe which runs the CRD4 or Correp FinRep mandate. EIOPA, which stands for the European Institutional and Operational Pensions Authority. I trust you'll all remember that. That is the insurance or Solvency II central regulator. So there are a bunch of different versions here. As you see, there's files with .cdm extensions. You simply select the appropriate file to load up the mandate, the filing package for the particular mandate. You'll see here they've been named with a certain naming convention. They're not they're not always delivered with this naming convention in place, but I've renamed some of them. But these numbers here relate actually to the version of the taxonomy, the XBRL taxonomy that has been delivered by the regulator. And in a couple of cases, you'll see we actually have a couple of different versions. Some of which, this one actually requires 1024 interim fix 13 in order to work, and that sort of thing. But as I said, in most cases, they're not dependent upon which interim fixes you have installed. So EIOPA, there's 1.5.2 B or C taxonomy, and there's also 2.0.1 taxonomy. So this is for the Solvency II stuff. The solvency mandate has sort of come about in two different phases. There's a phase that was in effect for 2015, which was called the preparatory filing phase, where larger companies were required to make filings to their local regulator, one annual filing and one quarterly filing over the course of the year. And this was really something that the regulator had put in place as a way of testing out their whole system and their test bed before the full requirements go live. And the full requirements for Solvency II go live as of January the 1st, 2016. Those require a significantly updated version of the taxonomy and of the files and the filing package, this 2.0.1 version. So going forward, it's really, if you're dealing with solvency customers, it's pretty much only the 2.0.1 stuff that you'll ever have to deal with, and not to worry about this old 1.5.2 stuff, because that's pretty much water under the bridge and should never be likely to be used again. With the EBA stuff, that's the Correct FinRep, the banking stuff. 2.3.1 is the latest version. There's a 2.4 on the horizon. I'm not sure when we'll provide a filing package for that, but that will come along in due course. So a user, whether they're a bank or an insurer, is first of all they're going to have to install one of these filing packages, and they do this through this simple mechanism. I'm not going to do it because they're already installed here in my version. So that's that. But then what you have is you have to identify what entity it is that is actually doing the reporting. And so there's a section called Reporting Entities. And when that finally decides to wake up and open, we'll see how we add an entity.
Hi, Hugh. This is Sophia. Just a quick question.
Sure.
Where do the customers get those packages from?
Okay. The packages there's various different places they can get them from, and what we've been doing to make it easier for customers to get them is we've actually been uploading them to a files area in the CDM user group community, the public community, and most of our customers have actually been getting them from there. I believe they are on Fix Central as well, and Charles John sort of puts them up there too, but that is such a cumbersome mechanism for people to use, and they need to get authorization on an individual basis most of the time to download them from there, that we found it's a lot simpler just to put it into the community.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so we have a reporting entities section here. Let's suppose we're going to add a new reporting entity, and when it finally wakes up, some days my machine sort of seems to just sing along happily, and other days it just seems to grind to a halt. Everything's happening on my machine. I'm not connected to any kind of server or anything. So you guys are going to have to suffer with the slow version today. Maybe I'm going to close notes. Sometimes I find that notes seems to sort of chew up vast quantities of resources on my local computer. That'll speed things up or not. Oh, jeez. Anyone want to sing a song or something while I'm waiting?
I would, Hugh, but unfortunately it'd be just you and I when the song ended. I think everybody else would leave by then.
You know what? I would sing, but I don't have the same skill set as my namesake, the singer from the '80s. So.
I don't know what it is that it's trying to do here. I'm trying to think of sort of what's going on in the background, and it doesn't seem to me that it would be that particularly complicated. But of course, I can't just back out of this now, you know.
Hugh, while we're waiting, can you give us a bit of an idea in terms of the reporting entity? Like, what is it? What are we going to try to accomplish through here?
Oh, okay. This the reporting entity is like I'm an insurance company, so I'm identifying myself as being XYZ Insurance Company. There'll be a few things like the various regulators will use different forms of a code to identify a particular reporting entity. Oh, here we go. And depending upon which country you're in, they may use a different mechanism to identify that entity. There's a thing called LEI, which is Legal Entity Identifier, which is an ISO standard that a lot of countries are using now. And every company has a unique ISO number, a unique LEI number, and so that uniquely identifies that organization. In some cases, you may have a situation, and we have an example, Banco Financia, they're a customer in Portugal, that they have their own number that is actually, they actually use the Bank of Portugal's numbering system. So they have, as their head office, they have a specific number, but then they have 5 subsidiaries in the country, each of which has their own separate number as well. So they would actually be setting up a whole bunch of different entities, one for each subsidiary. So let's just go to an example here. So I'm just going to call it bank. And you'll notice now on the regulatory authority drop-down, we have provided support for a lot of different regulators. What we're seeing in the drop-down here, because I've got both insurance and banking filing packages loaded, this is probably a list of the ones that work for both banks and insurers. Let's just, since I mentioned Portugal, let's just use them. And you see, under Entity Scheme, now we've got Legal Entity Identifier, or Código de Instituição, which is the individual Portuguese one. But if we're going to use, let's say we're going to use Legal Entity Identifier, then they would know what their Legal Entity Identifier is. It's generally just a series of numbers and letters, and they also, at this point, would identify when their fiscal year ends, and it is, and it's usually December. That identifying the fiscal year end is important because it it will drive a number of other things when it comes to setting up reporting dates and stuff for the various different types of reports they have to do. So anyway, okay, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to set up my bank that way, and hopefully, yeah. So now I've defined, I've loaded up my filing packages, and I've defined who I am, which bank I am, and now we're going to go and create a filing report. And I'm going to do Correp FinRep here because I have set this up as a bank. And so we go into the report section, which is the same report section that you would be used to for CDM, and we can create new reports. And because I'm doing Basel III banking reports, I've just got these organized in this demo image here, and I'm going to do template reporting. So I right-click on template reporting and I go add report, or obviously I could use the add from the toolbar up at the top. And you'll notice there's two possibilities under add report. There's empty or filing. Empty would be the standard report that you're used to using for all kinds of regular uses of CDM. Filing is special. Filing is what we're doing here. We're adding a filing report. So this will that will kick in a special wizard, which will now work through for setting up our initial filing report.
So Hugh, if they have set it up as an empty report initially by mistake, and then later on they realize, oh, we actually need to do this Correp or FinRep filing, I guess there's no way for them to switch that report to the what was the other option? Filing.
No, filing report. No, well,
so they have to start from scratch again.
Yeah, well, I mean, if they set it up as an empty report, what they'll get is exactly what it says, an empty report. They'll see nothing there when they go into the report, and it's like, what am I going to do now? Oh, that was silly of me. I've got nothing there to work with. Whereas what you will see in a moment is with the filing report, we're actually going to provide them a whole bunch of standard reporting objects as a result of running this wizard. So right. So my name. This is the name of the report. So let's call it annual solo report. Solo and group are terms that you'll often hear. Solo means I'm just reporting for one entity, and group means I'm doing like a consolidated report for a whole bunch of subsidiaries, perhaps. And there are different reporting requirements depending upon whether you're doing solo or group reporting. The reporting entity, I'm going to choose from one of the entities I've got set up. In this case, I'm going to use bank, and now it's going to it's going off and sort of saying, okay, now what are the various report types that are suitable? And oh, look at that! Isn't that nice? Internal server error. Dum-de-dum. Okay, well let's maybe switch over to Solvency II and see what we get. Okay, so now I'm just going to do a Solvency one, not a banking one, just to show. But the mechanisms are the same. There do tend to be sometimes issues with having both banking and insurance running in the same instance of CDM, and that might be what was causing that here. And typically you wouldn't find both banking and insurance being set up in the same instance because you're either bank or you're an insurance company, typically. Report types. So here are a whole set of different types of reports that are provided in our filing package for solvency reporting. And if I'm going to do annual Solvency II reporting solo, this will actually choose a certain number of templates that have been defined by the regulator for this particular kind of report. So the customer should know which kind of report they're wanting to do. Am I doing annual? Am I doing quarterly? Am I doing solvency reporting? Am I doing financial stability reporting? So on and so forth. So these would the business users would know what kind of reporting that they're trying to work on. There is an issue with the fact that this calls itself monthly. It isn't really monthly; it's annual. But what that really means is that the possible reference dates, and you notice this is a drop down called reference date. What the possible reference date could be, and it could be the end of any month, apparently, for this kind of report. So, based upon your year end, etc., we'll provide, and the version of the report types that you're using, we will provide you with a list of possible reference dates. A reference date is the sort of as of date that the organization is reporting. So, we're reporting numbers as of the end of 2015, for example. So that would be 31st of December 2015. It automatically fills in what the start date is for the period that you're reporting on, and then we'll move on to next. So if we move on to next, the first thing we're going to do is define which currency we're reporting in. As it stands at the moment, all of these reports are monetary values are reported in only one currency. We do anticipate that will change at some point, possibly during next year, that they will actually allow multiple currency reporting, which is going to make life a lot more complicated. But at the moment, it's nice and simple, and we can specify the currency. There's a big drop down of all the currencies, or you can start to type the currency name. In this case, I'm going to use euros. It defaults to a due date. This is an internal due date that I want to get my reporting finished. It defaults to the due date of 1 month after the reference date. And there's a field here for identifying what the submission date is, which is actually, generally speaking, about 45 days after the due date. So I can update that. Then the next part of the wizard defines the report accuracy. This is really largely related to the XBRL output, although there are other consequences of defining report accuracy too, which I'll explain in a minute. With the XBRL output, we'll have a decimals equals as part of the XBRL that says, we're reporting these numbers correct to X decimal places. By default, we start with 0 decimal places for monetary items. In other words, whole numbers of euros, whole numbers of pounds, whole numbers of crowns, or whatever the local currency is. You can adjust that up or down to a certain amount. It won't let you go below -3, which would be thousands, in this case thousands of euros, because the mandate doesn't permit. There are certain rules about them in the mandate that say you must report in at least thousands of units. Different countries have different requirements here. The UK, for example, requires you to report in pounds and pence, whereas some other countries may only require you to report in whole numbers of euros. So, again, the customer has to know a little bit about what their country's rules are. Percentage amounts typically are reported to 4 decimal places. And we've not actually seen anybody want to change this value, but sometimes the option is there to do so. Again, the mandates typically require you to report in at least this number of to this accuracy. You'll notice as I change this number, you'll notice the value in this field over here, the tolerance field, is changing. What this is a consequence of saying, well, I'm reporting to 2 decimal places of accuracy. What that, of course, means is that when I say it's 2 decimal places of accuracy, that the actual value that's being reported is whatever you see plus or minus this tolerance, in this case 0.005. And that is important when it comes to some of the validation rules. Because there are, one of the aspects of these mandates is that there is a whole slew of validation rules that that have to be run against the numbers that you're reporting to make sure that the reports are self-consistent. that they're typically of the nature sort of something like A equals B plus C. But of course, if you've got rounding, this tolerance takes into account the potential for rounding errors being introduced when you're doing arithmetic, and that's all built into the software. But this sort of gives you just a visual hint as to what those tolerances might be. Okay, move on to the next stage, the third stage of the wizard, which is to select the various forms that you want to report. As you'll see now in this screen, there's a large number of forms that are available, and as I expand out any one of these, I can get the individual forms showing up, and I can select which ones I want to include in my filing report. Again, the business users should know which forms they need to report on, and often that will depend upon the nature of their business. For example, if I'm an insurance company and I'm only doing life insurance, I'm only going to have to report forms that are relevant for life insurers. Whereas if I'm doing property insurance or some other kind of insurance, there may be a different forms that I have to file or fill out and file the XBRL for. So this is where the users can choose which forms they need. This doesn't tie them down to only this set of forms, because they can always add and remove forms later. We have time, I'll show you that. You will notice that there are two different types of icons by these different types of forms. There's this one which looks like a little bit like a spreadsheet icon, and indeed that is what it means. It means that that form is presented in the form of an Excel spreadsheet as a reporting object when we get to the reporting side of things. This one looks like a little disk icon, and this says that this is a form that we don't know in advance what the how many rows or how many columns there are to be reported here. In fact, one of the more common ones that we use as an example is this assets and liabilities by currency one here, because this is a form that's actually a list of all your assets and liabilities that are held in specific currencies. And but now you'll notice also beside this there's a little drop down. If I hit this drop down, I can set up this form in two different ways. I can set it up as a query form where I'll actually bind an external query, and I'll show you an example of this later. But you can actually bind an external query to the form, because in some cases, some of these forms, like if you're a big insurance company and you're listing all your major assets, this could run into hundreds of thousands of rows of data, and for performance reasons, it doesn't make sense to be trying to bring hundreds of thousands of rows of data into a reporting object in CDM. You might want to just leave it out in some relational database structure and have that brought in when you're generating the XBRL at the end of things and when you're doing the validation, running the validation rules. But you have the choice with most of these to define them whether they're a query form or whether they're a regular form. In this, so you'll notice the icon changes as I select between query form and regular form. A regular form means that yes, okay, we are going to make it into a spreadsheet type form. It's not going to be too huge. Query form means I'm just going to bind this set of data to a relational template. So just for the sake of this demonstration, and I'm just going to do a couple of forms here with balance sheet and assets and liabilities to show you that. So we're going to hit finish, and a background process now runs. Creates a filing report. You can expand this out a little bit. No, it doesn't tell us much. Anyway, it's finished. So it's created this this template reporting report called Annual SOLAP. So now I can go and open that report. It's kind of showing up here. Of course, it's in the wrong place now because I ended up doing an insurance one, but that's fine. And you'll see it's just got these various forms here. Of course, as always, I get to go and update the report permissions because I've just created this new form, and I need to give myself godlike powers with it in order to continue demonstrating it. So that's done that. Go back to the report, and let's just open the balance sheet. You will notice here that we've got a sort of a duplicated hierarchy. This is a bug that is a known issue with the solvency reports. The duplicate hierarchy aspect. I'm not sure when that'll get removed. It doesn't actually do any harm. It's just sort of annoying. So you'll see this template is already here. It's already set up and ready for data to be entered. This is a balance sheet. This is a standard format of a form from the Solvency Reporting. So this is one of the standard forms that they would need to fill with data. You will notice that all these cells have got little red comment icons. As I hover over the cell, this actually one of the things that we've added into the system here is these comments that actually provide you with a complete description of what the dimensionality of the data that goes into that cell actually is, as defined by the regulator in their XBRL taxonomy. So you can hover over any one of these, and that gives you an indication as to just what data you need to put into that form. So we can check out this form for data acquisition. The way you bring data into these forms is exactly the same in standard CDM, and I'm sure all of you folks understand that stuff. Connect to data sources, set up Excel data links to the data that's brought in. Various different users use various different methods for that. There's some can get pretty sophisticated with some pretty fancy use of VLOOKUP. Others just already have got their data formatted, even sometimes in the form of Excel spreadsheets that they connect to that are external to CDM. We have some users that operate in that way, but that's all sort of standard CDM functionality that you're probably familiar with. But one of the other features of the filing package approach is what we call the on-the-fly validation. Notice down here we actually have on-the-fly validation has happened automatically. We have a whole bunch of warnings, which I'll explain those warnings later. But I'm going to show you those. I'm going to talk about those a little bit more in a minute. Let's just add some manual data into this form. Come on.
One quick question, Hugh, and I'm sure it's probably simple. This form can't be edited otherwise, right? Like we've only provided editing to the certain cells that they can input formula or data into. Okay.
That is correct. You should not be. I mean, you could put stuff over here. You can put #S, #D, all that stuff. You can put it over here. But this sort of section of the form, where you see you've got the row headers and the column headers, this is fixed. And in fact, if you were to try to add a row or a column or delete any of these rows or columns,
or move a cell,
or move cells around, that sort of stuff, when it comes time to save that form, we have a check, and it'll say, "Hey, you've buggered up this form. You can't save this. Sorry."
Perfect.
Go back and fix it. So that prevents that kind of problems, as you've identified, would definitely arise if you were to do that sort of thing.
Yeah, no, I assumed because it's a very specific form that we've locked it down pretty tight.
That's right. Yeah. It turns out there's no sort of mechanical mechanism that we can implement sort of right in here as I am at this moment to prevent me from doing that. Really, I'm limited by what Excel allows me to do. But as I said, we do the check when it comes time to save the form. Okay, so I've entered data in here. Now, watch what happens on the validation window when I save the form. So I'm going save the form. Do I want to reload it? And see how this turned into red? What that is telling me is that I've got two errors. Let's turn off the warnings and the successes first of all. I've got two errors that are in this form. This is because there's a whole set of predefined validation rules that the regulator has mandated as part of this whole system. These validation rules are expressed in XBRL formula link bases, but using the XBRL formula link base mechanism is inherently slow and requires you to generate the XBRL first. So far we've done nothing with XBRL. But they've also identified these rules in another format that we've taken that format and converted that into something that's natively packaged up in the filing package. So these validation rules are embodied in that whole filing package, and they automatically get evaluated at the whenever you save a reporting object. And that's what happened here. These various rules that relate to this particular form were evaluated. They're given these rather obscure codes. These are the codes that the regulator has provided. But you'll see now his description of what this rule is. And this description is expressed here by referencing the cells in the Excel workbook. And as I hover over any one of these cells, you will actually see the little pop-out that comes out that tells me what the location is, what the value is, and what the tolerance that's been applied to that means. And over here is the actual evaluation of that expression. This expression here, based upon the data that I've entered in here, is 7 plus or minus. It says that 7 plus or minus 0.05 should equal 27 plus or minus 0.015. I guess the zero. That's because these numbers. There's an 8 in there, and there's a 9 in there. There's a 10 in there. So that's our 27, and there are 3 values that have actually got 3 cells that have actually got values. So the tolerance, the potential rounding error from any one of these is 0.05. So those 3 tolerances add up to 0.015. If I had values in these cells as well, that tolerance would get bigger and bigger and bigger the more values that were actually there. So it's smart enough to recognize the difference between not filled in and a value of 0. So, clearly there's an error here because the rule says that the value in D17 has to be the sum of all of these. Now, the other feature about this is if I click, you'll notice here I'm in cell D21, but if I click on there, the cursor moves to cell D17. So I can actually navigate directly to any one of these cells when I click on it from the rule itself. So let's fix that particular one by virtue of the brute force and ignorance. I'm just going to put the number 17 in there, save that. Let's see what happens. Load the report object. Just if I put 17, I should have put in 27. Save it, and there we go. So now I've only got one error that's shown up. So that's and I can fix that as well. So that's the errors. Now, one of the things that, especially when you're in a support situation, that might crop up is these warnings. And this again is one of the things that I consider to be a product deficiency, which hopefully we're still discussing whether we're going to rectify this or not, and if so, how. But you'll notice that the formulas that are referenced here have some cells from this reporting object, but there's these letters showing up here. And the description is some of the data points that are used by the formula are not accessible in the current form. So what that means is that the way that this particular kind of validation rule has been defined is it says that C84 plus C85 from this form has to equal some value that is in some other form somewhere. And that's just been identified here as C. Now, what I would really like to see here, obviously, is the name of the form and the cells in that form, and then I could go and jump over to it. But that's not in the software right now. Users, they've sort of got used to this a little bit. They don't like it, understandably. They feel that these should be fully evaluated at this point. This on-the-fly validation should work across form. It doesn't. So that's something you need to be aware of. Then we've also got the successes, and so this is just saying, there's a bunch of other validation rules, and these validation rules, by the way, are held in an external spreadsheet that sort of lists out what they are. This validation rule works, so you don't need to worry about it. So you can turn the display on and off of the various different kinds of validation situations that you will encounter. So how does a user deal with some of these cross-form validations, some of these warnings? Okay, so let's go and look at that. See if I can remember how we do this. We go back to the home screen and we go validate, and we go full report validation. If I do full report validation, that will now go off and explicitly run all the validation rules that cover all the forms in this whole system, and go and do that as a background task. And when that's finished, I can click on the little open folder thing, and I get it brings me a report validation spreadsheet that lists them all, and it lists all the forms and how many successes and failures there are. I don't know if it actually doesn't seem in that spreadsheet to list the actual details of the success or failure. But if we go back into CDM, you'll notice here now I've got this extra tab that's shown up by filing validation messages, and here are a whole bunch of errors that have cropped up, and it says here, so here's an error, and it says that I've got an error in this particular form for 23811H. So let's go back here. That takes me to that form, and 23811H actually is that particular error that we left over before. Let's look at another one. So we've got 332-2H. So click on that, it'll open up that particular form, 332-2H. There should be a description. I think the filing package that I've got for Solvency at the moment doesn't have all the validation rules fully implemented. So this is one of the ones that isn't fully implemented by the looks of it. But there would be typically a description of whatever that rule was. It probably says that it needs to be a particular have a value that's selected from a particular set of values. I may be able to show you that in one of the other sort of predefined reports that we've got already set up. But before we do that, I just want to show. Well, no, actually, I'm going to flip over now to a different report that's already like pre-canned here, and has got some of this stuff already set up. So yeah, and I'm going to show you one of the ones from the preparatory solvency reporting here. And this is see, there's just a few forms where they've got data loaded and validated, and one of those is one of these ones with a disk icon here. It's one of the query binding forms. So let me open that form first, and as you can see, there's no data in there, but the validation rules also are quite comfortable. But they notice it says the report object is a query form. So what does that mean? That was one of the ones that I showed you earlier, that had this icon where it's bound to a specific query. So how do we find out more about that? Well, we can go into the Data tab. Actually, I have to check out the form before I can do it. Go into the Data tab and go Manage Data Queries. You'll see that this form is actually connected to these three queries that I've got set up in my query section, and you notice that it has this thing called bind to the report object. So this isn't a query where you actually bring the data into the Excel sheet itself, but it just connects the query to the to that form, so that when you're generating the XBRL, the query gets executed, values that are returned from the query are then thrown into the XBRL document and used as output. So let's take a look at those queries. Which ones were they? Now I've forgotten. Let's look again. So it was H5, 6, and 7. So go into our queries, data queries. So H5, 6, and 7. These are set up from SQL database. We'll open up the query, and you look at the query results, and you'll see. Did I run it? Maybe I have to run it first. Yes. So this is a predefined format that is necessary in order for this query binding thing to work, and the columns have to be a certain in a certain or they don't have to be in a certain order, but they have to have certain names in the result of the query. How do I know what those are supposed to be, you're probably asking? Well, we also provide, along with the filing package, a whole set of instructions as to for each of these query-bound forms how the query should look, and this relates to the so the kind of data that comes in here is the Y coordinate and the X coordinate in that form. So let's take a look at that. So you'll notice you've got these column headers, the X and Y coordinates, and there can also be Z coordinates as well if there's more than some of these forms have what called open Z-axis forms. So this is an open Y-axis form. So this means we don't know how many rows there might be if we were to fill it out in a form. You can have open X-axis forms where we don't know how many columns there are, or open Z-axis forms where you might have one copy of the form for each, perhaps for each currency in which you have information to report. So going back here, we see our Y coordinate is always R0999, as we saw from that form. It's always this one, R0999. So the X coordinate, we see these are the various column headers, and here is the data that would actually would appear if we were to actually populate this form with numbers. Some of this data is just textual data, some of it is some other code. In this case, this actually is a little bit of XBRL, or XML if you like. It's a QName, and again we provide a sort of a lookup thing. This probably means Europe. This means geographic area Europe. It has to be the QName that goes along with that, and again that's provided in a document that is delivered along with the filing package that gives you all those sort of lookup codes. GBP, so that's the currency, and so on and so forth. So if I go back to the report, if I were to now generate the XBRL from this report, I have a generate button here on the report object. Actually, let's do it for the whole report. So generate the entire report. I'm going to generate an XBRL instance from this. You'll notice I have the option to perform XBRL validation when I do so. So what that would do would be it would generate the XBRL, then it would throw the resulting XBRL at the taxonomy using the uses the Fujitsu engine, which is the same one that we use for our pivot grid type XBRL generation. It would throw that and run formula link-based validation against that XBRL instance. That can actually be an exceedingly long process. It can take many hours to run for a really full report with hundreds of thousands of data items in it. It's not something that you really want to set about doing on a regular basis. So, but I'm just going to generate the instance now without doing the XBRL validation. Background process does it. We'll go off and read all the data points. It'll bring in some of the stuff from that relational table, and it will generate the XBRL, and it will also generate validation reports, as well as a set of filled-in templates, including this template here. Will get filled in with data, and we'll see that when we open up that document when it's finally finished.
Hugh, this is Radu. I have
Hello.
a quick question.
Sure.
At the time you bind a query to one of these forms, is there any validation in terms of, for example, for an OpenY form, if there's enough columns, or I don't know. I know basically the data in the database needs to match the form in some way.
Yes, indeed, it will check. I think it does at the point where you define the binding. It might say that there's missing values or a missing column from the query result or that sort of thing. And then when you save that form, when you close this form, you'll notice that I've had to check it out in order to do that. I think again when I do the save, I think then it'll go and run the on-the-fly validation rules against anything to do with that form. So I think at that point it will execute the query.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the generation has worked. So if I get the output, throw it on the desktop. Take a look here. So I've got my XBRL instance, which you all know and love, that lovely XBRL stuff, and so here's our output report from that, and you'll see that this is now for every template that I put values in, that I have values in, it's showing me the data. So here there was a balance sheet that I think that was connected to a TM1 source or something. But here is that particular form that I was using here, the SO602001, and that has actually gone and inserted into this external Excel workbook. It's gone and inserted all those values that it's brought in from that relational database, and also in many cases it's actually expanded out that code that you would have seen there. So let's have a look. Let's say this one, for example. It's expanded that out into the full name, the United Kingdom, so you can actually see what that code has translated into. So that's something that happens after you, at the same time you generate the XBRL. I think you can also, what am I trying to do here? To do that, go back to CDM. I think when I went to generate, I could also have just generated that Excel workbook without generating the XBRL instance as well. I could have done that. And you have the standard options like performing full refresh and those sorts of things at the same time. So I could have done that too. So so let's see, what have we got here? So go back to this one. No, the other one. So there's the output from those various query-bound forms. That is the bulk of what else do I need to show? Well, you understand about roll forward. Again, there's the roll forward mechanism with query variables, updating query variables, and one of the things that the roll forward mechanism does is that if you've got a filing package and you've used a particular version of the taxonomy which is no longer in effect, and you roll forward to a reference date that is outside of that effective period, it'll actually warn you, and it will do updates to the to some of the forms. I probably need to talk a little bit about that. So I think go back to let me think about this. Oh yes, filing packages. Right. So you'll as you saw earlier on, there was a whole set of filing packages that I had available to me. Now let's suppose that we've got this version 2 of the EIOPA final, the EIOPA final filing package. You'll notice that Replace Package has become available. When I select that package, the Replace Package button has now become available. When we issue version 3 of this, which hopefully will be available very soon, and will have a whole bunch more of those validations incorporated into it, if you click on Replace Package, you get exactly the same kind of dialogue as you had before for the Open Package, except that and you can go and select your replacement package. But it's also smart enough to know that it has to be a consistent package. So if I were to do something stupid like choose this one and go Open, it will go. It says, "Oh, the existing package is code EIOPA final. New packages are EIOPA." It doesn't like that. It won't. There's no OK button. The OK button is grayed out because these are inconsistent packages. So I can only replace a package with a package that is consistent with the one that I'm trying to replace. And what happens when I do that is that the types of things that would be in an updated package are, number one, updated validation rules, and that's fairly simple. But if the templates have changed or the taxonomy has changed because the regulator has updated their requirements, then it gets somewhat more sophisticated. I can't demonstrate it at the moment because we've only got the basic versions so far for Solvency. We're right at the beginning of the mandate, but what will happen down the road is that the EIOPA will come out with new versions and new templates. They will modify some of the existing templates, and depending upon the nature of the modification, we can, where we can, we will automatically modify the existing templates in your existing report for the package that you're trying to replace. If you need to, if a template is sufficiently sort of munged around by the regulator, that's a technical term, munged around, a modified, changed, rows added, rows deleted, that sort of thing. If it's sufficiently complex that we can't reliably automate the update, then what happens is that we will update that reporting object with a copy of the old filled out template and a copy of the new template. That means that both, so there'll be different tabs in the reporting object, and that will enable users to use sort of copy paste or paste special or whatever to update the new form with whatever links they may have set up to their source data. So it does require some manual intervention on their part, but it makes it as easy as possible by retaining any old linkages that you might have set up to your data sources. I think that's about it. Other than possibly some stuff that I haven't covered. Any questions? Dead silence. Are people still alive? Good. Yes. Yes.
Thanks, Hugh, for doing this. I appreciate it.
Hey, not at all. Not at all.
No, this is awesome. Thank you.
Great. Folks in Romania can walk over to Andrei Perici or Sarah Stoicanescu's desk and ask them for any further input. If you're around elsewhere, bug me if you have questions, or bug either of them too.
Hugh, I have a quick question.
Sure.
Can this use a cascade report? Because I know for U.S. GAAP, the customers, they cannot have cascade report if they are doing XBRL tagging.
Okay, there's a sort of a cascading mechanism. We actually use the roll forward mechanism to take once you sort of set up your mechanism, the data connections for one entity. I think this is how Banco Financia does it. They set up all their data connections in one report, and then by judicious use of query variables, they use the roll forward mechanism, but they don't actually change the date. They just change the entity, and they'll roll forward to the other entity, and that way the data values that they're bringing in will automatically come from their judiciously designed queries that will reflect the correct entity.
Okay, and since these are prefixed template, there's no need to do the share object, reference object.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so that's how sort of semi-cascade it works, because you're not doing the share reference object thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good. Okay, well, thanks everybody for watching this, and I hope that it's been reasonably helpful and useful, and let's hope you don't get any support calls. It's all so simple.
Thanks, Hugh.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Hugh.
Okay, cheers.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.